Hello students, I am Dr. L.K. Das, Assistant Professor of Sociology at the Department of HSS IIT Roorkee. Welcome to another lecture of the NPTEL course Power and Politics in Contemporary India, a Sociological View. In today's lecture, we will discuss about a key component of India's history, the role of a self-help group called Kudumbashree in Kerala and the way it empowered or the way it created a notion of empowerment among women in that state. So, self-help groups are significant in the history of post-liberalization India, primarily because what they did, they created systems of what we call affordable credit, building of social capital and promotion of community solidarity among women. So, what does this mean? It means that there are women, there are people in this country which are considered to be not credit worthy. Not credit worthy means that banks or formal financial institutions will not provide them any form of credit because these institutions do not know if these women can return the money that they are taking as loan. So, self-help groups become part of this gap between the money lenders and organized formal financial institutions. So, this is where self-help groups are there. So, self-help groups constitute this marginalized woman or not so marginalized woman who form a collective. The formation of this collective means that they have collective learning, collective negotiation and collective self-representation in public spaces. As a collective, they form a community, and when they form a community, then they become credit worthy. Now, the financial institutions or formal financial institutions can lend money to these communities or to these collectives, and they would, or the leaders within these collectives would ensure that the members of these collectives pay back the loan to these banks on time. Now, Kudumbashree in Kerala becomes very significant here because what it did was that it not only spoke about the financial institutions and the relationship between collectives, it also spoke about socio-political mobilization of women. Now, why it was successful in Kerala and why we are discussing this? In the reading that you do on Kerala, you will get to know that the Panchayati Raj system in Kerala is the most successful. It's a success story. Why? First is that Kerala happens to be one of the most educated regions in the country. Second, women in Kerala are not hiding behind veils and hiding behind closed doors. They have been coming out and working in the fields, in the market for several generations. And third, whether it is the left front government or it is the other side, they have all ensured that a certain level of development is working there, and there is a close negotiation between different levels of the state. Last but not the least, because Kerala is an educated society, so it is also a politically highly aware society. Now, this is not ahistorical. Ahistorical means that this did not happen overnight. Rather, it happened through the decades of political mobilization in terms of social welfare, in terms of organizations to improve religious welfare, in terms of creation of groups that speak about citizenship, that speak about the social causes, so on and so forth. So that is the reason why what we see when we see women in Kerala participating in the decentralization model, we have to look at the history of it that goes beyond post-liberalism, rather that goes all the way back to the 19th and 18th centuries. So it was established in 1998 as Kerala State's Poverty Eradication Mission, and the pilots were started in Alappuzha and Mamalapuram to focus on nutrition and microcredit. As I said, microcredit was important because a lot of people, particularly the ones who are working in fisheries or dry fish business, but they are women and they do not get microcredit, or they do not get any credit from banks. So when this a state-led mission was started, it created conditions for the beginning of Kudumbashree, because it was also about decentralized planning structures. How do you look at something called poverty alleviation, empowerment, and governance? Because if you bring something that is related to poverty alleviation but it is not empowering anybody, that means you are creating beneficiaries that we had discussed in the previous class. Now, when you are empowering, it's about what kind of empowerment. Is it empowerment in the neoliberal structure, or this empowerment is about targeting a certain group of people? Now, a target, as we discussed in the previous class, could start from a certain point, but it could get completely misguided. So, a multidimensional poverty, the multidimensional deprivation approach was significant in this case. That is, this is the reason why Amartya would call it Kerala model of development, because Kerala model of development looks at poverty alleviation, empowerment, and governance not as three different verticals, rather as one integrated idea of how to develop and what development means. And Kudumbashree is not just any NGO, rather it was highly anchored in the Panchayati Raj institutions, so that there is accountability and there is citizen participation. So it was once the initial stage was covered, the next stage was to create a federated structure. So the first level was the neighborhood groups. Second was area development society. Third was community development society. And these are all three different levels. But this does not mean that they are following at a hierarchical structure. So rather than hierarchy, what we see here is that households are linked to ward level and wards are linked to panchayat or municipality. That means it's a closely integrated structure of identification of households, what kind of resources are required, and how state and non-state actors can come together in order to facilitate the role of women in planning and implementation. This also ensures that there is scalability, representation, and leadership pathways for women. So, what does leadership pathways of women mean? It means that if somebody is quite well established, is able to identify or show her leadership skills, can move from household level to that of ward level, and if at the ward level they are able to again show their leadership skills and the skills of thrift, planning and efficiency, they can move to panchayat or municipality level. So this way, as of 2017, more than 2.5 lakh neighborhood groups were created, covering 40 lakh women. Now 40 lakh is not a small number when you're talking about a place like Kerala, which has one of the lowest fertility rates in the country or across the globe. So the country or the only region we can compare Kerala in terms of fertility is that of Japan, which is negative. So they are moving below replacement ratio. So Kudumbashree initially acted as a microfinance institution. So as I discussed previously, it was about pooling of savings, could be as little as 20 rupees per day. You are an informal sector worker, maybe a daily wage laborer, or maybe you're a fisherwoman, and you have earned 100 rupees per day. Not every day you are earning 100 rupees. So on any given day you have earned 100 rupees. Out of that 100 rupees, you ensure that you save up 20 rupees with this self-help group called Kudumbashree. The rest 80 rupees you can spend for your own the resources, for your own household and for your own other kind of work. Now this 20 rupees, when 100 women are able to save up 20 rupees each day, that means this group is able to save how much? 2000 rupees on a daily basis. Now 2000 rupees, when you identify it with 365 days, it's a big sum. That is how close to 2000 crore rupees were saved up by Kudumbashree. Small savings become big institution builders. Yeah. Secondly, the leadership that emerged within this group of Kudumbashree were also educated in financial knowledge, how to manage finance, how to give credit, how to ensure that the fellow members pay back the credit that they have taken, and to create an ecosystem in which there is trust. Because there is trust, so everybody is willing to participate in this entire enterprise. Once the money is gathered, then in terms of loans, it started giving money to small and micro enterprises like catering units, tailoring centers, retail outlets, agribusiness, so on and so forth. So the women who participated in the Kudumbashree were so happy to get even this kind of very marginal loans that they ended up repaying whatever money they were taking. So the rate of return of money into this financial or small financial institutions was very high. It was more than 90%. So that is where Kudumbashree became a torch bearer for many self-help groups throughout the country. But at the same time, while this was being done, there was also the notion of social empowerment and capacity building. Because the moment women started having some money, some thrift, some kind of entrepreneurship, they started discussing about health, about education, about domestic violence, about gender inequality. These issues were not initially the part of Kudumbashree program, but this was an aftermath of the kind of empowerment that was going on or that was happening in this entire organization. So once that was done, so the members themselves started creating the new schools as well as the old days ashrams, the orphanages, so on and so forth. They also started having youth initiative programs for intergenerational civic participation. So in a way, the Kudumbashree was not just about looking at what kind of income someone is getting, but it was also about social empowerment. Because when a woman starts speaking about gender inequality and domestic violence at a public forum, that is the beginning of questioning what is happening inside the houses. And when they start questioning what is happening inside the houses, it brings a transformatory change, because speaking itself is a revolutionary act in this scheme. Now, while we are speaking about bargaining with patriarchy or bargaining with power, there are certain issues with this model. Issues with the model is that if state remains as an arbiter, then does Kudumbashree work as an autonomous body, or it becomes just a recipient of what is being decided in the state's capital, or what are the state's agendas, and everybody who is participating in it become part of a certain bureaucracy. And when this happens, then a lot of other kind of issues emerge. The other kind of issues is regarding what kind of products you are creating. For example, you are creating coir based ropes, but everybody in every unit of Kudumbashree is engaged in the same work. You are participating in some other kind of work, so everybody is working on the same kind, because this kind of schemes are being formulated in the state's capital and then the sent down to these Kudumbashree units to the work out. Now, interestingly, if this is how it is supposed to be done, then the problem lies with duplication and confusion, and there would not be enough market for specific products. So that is the reason why we can also argue that Kudumbashree on the one hand illustrates the shift from microfinance to micropolitics in women's empowerment. But at the same time, can the Kudumbashree model be replicated in other Indian states with different political cultures, where the idea of long-term sustainability is not taken into consideration? Women have historically not been part of the public sphere, as well as women are not as educated as Malayali women. So, what kind of differential approach is required in order for Kudumbashree kind of systems or Kudumbashree kind of structures to become sources of women's empowerment anywhere and everywhere in the country or in the global south? So, these are some of the references that we have, and you can go through them and see what kind of models in terms of case studies and others that Kudumbashree has created. Now, Kudumbashree is a highly celebrated empowerment model, but as a catch, in the previous two classes we have been discussing about governmentality. Now, what are the key ideas of governmentality is that surveillance. So, you have maybe 5 members in a group, and the role of these 5 members is to ensure that these 5 members pay back their dues on time. And if one person is defaulting, that means probably the other 4 members are going to the come to this one individual and harass her, or there is continuous surveillance as to what kind of activities this woman is engaged in, so that she is not paying back the money. So surveillance here is being taken to the micro level. And if you look at this entire enterprise from a Foucauldian perspective, then this is a classic example of governmentality and control over the bodies of this highly vulnerable women. Now, these are two sides of the story. So, I suggest that you read more about Kudumbashree and similar kind of models of empowerment that are being propagated in India and in the global south, and decide for yourself whether they're actual empowerment or the control over women's bodies. Thank you.